morning, everyone, to Metro Board Activities. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Metro Board Activities of September 28th, 2023. To start off, I'd like to ask our Chief Safety and Readiness Officer, Ms. Teresa Impastato, to provide us with our safety contact. Ms. Impastato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to Metro headquarters. In the event of an there's an AED located at the entrance. Metro customers to be aware of the if you and someone you'll be connected to the suicide and crisis response. At any time, if you observe any concerning behavior in the Metro system, contact MTPD via text or phone. For additional information on suicide prevention, contact the
Thank you, Teresa. Again, welcome to today's Metro Board activities, and this is the meeting of the Metro Board's Executive Committee. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'll ask our Board Corporate Secretary to call the roll. Ms. Ellison.
Chair Smedberg.
Present.
Vice Chair McAndrew.
Present.
Vice Chair Lowe.
Present.
Director Klein. Director Letourneau. Present. Alternate Director Worth.
Present.
Director Drummer.
Present.
Alternate Director Helfer. Present. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Does anyone have any objections to the agenda from a committee member? Hearing and seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes before us for approval. The minutes from the September 14th meeting and the executive session on that same day. Are there any objections, corrections, or comments on those sets of minutes? Okay. Hearing none and seeing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have one item on our agenda this morning to accept a report from the Inspector General and authorize it for posting on the IG's website. Under the board's bylaws, the Executive Committee is responsible for reviewing and accepting the reports of the Inspector General. The committee has reviewed the following reports: evaluation of the 7000 series rail car cannibalization for parts. Before we take a vote, I'll ask our Inspector General, Mr. Feblis, who would like to provide the committee with a highlight of this report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Directors. Based on concerns raised by a former WMATA official, OIG conducted a review of WMATA's process for rail car cannibalization of the 7000 series train. The objective of the review was to assess the effectiveness of the cannibalization for spare parts based on the concerns received. OIG identified gaps in the process and procedure with potential safety implications and made 5 recommendations. In total, 45 parts were cannibalized from these rail cars. The rail cars were placed back into service during OIG's review. WMATA management concurred with 3 recommendations and initiated corrective actions. Management disagreed with 1 recommendation and a portion of another. Planned actions by management included conducting safety assessments, of rail car service and inspections that apply to the 7,000 series rail cars that received cannibalized safety-sensitive parts and updating standard operating procedures. This concludes my comments, and if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Feblis. Any comments or questions from a committee member? Hearing and seeing none, acceptance of this report constitutes the board's authorization to post it on the Inspector General's website, provided that the IG has conferred with the General Counsel and confirmed that any private or confidential information has been removed and or redacted in accordance with applicable law and WMATA policy. I would like to move approval of this item. Is there a second from a committee member?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Ms. Ellison, please call the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair McAndrew? Vice Chair Lowe? Aye. Ms. Klein? Aye. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. These reports have been accepted, and the Inspector General has been authorized to post them online. That concludes our business for today's meeting. We will stand adjourned for just a few moments, and I'll immediately turn the floor over to Mr. Drummer to begin the Safety and Operations Committee.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Safety and Operations Committee. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Are there any objections by members of the committee? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to approval of our minutes from our September 14th meeting. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented as well. Today we have one item on our agenda, Metro's performance for fiscal year 2023, which covers July 20 to June 2023. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Webster and Ms. Holt.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Tom Webster, Executive Vice President for Planning and Performance at Metro. I'm joined by my colleague Jordan Holt, Director of Performance. Pleased to be here this morning to present our annual performance report for fiscal year 2023. It covers the period from July 1 of 22 to June 30th of 2023 and compares performance against our targets that Metro leadership set for the year, considering our resources and strategies and informed by how we perform relative to our peer. Back in February, Metro adopted our new strategic plan, Your Metro, the Way Forward. This report aligns with particularly the service excellence goal, providing information on how well we are making progress in service excellence goals and targets and objectives by tracking key. In fiscal year 2024, we are renaming this report to the Service Excellence Report and adding some new KPIs, key performance indicators, that are in the Strategic Transformation Plan, but have been reported previously. They include perception of safety from crime on board vehicles, perception of cleanliness, rail real-time prediction availability, and missed Metro access trips. For the first quarter, FY24, we will be scheduled to present at the November committee meeting. So fiscal year 2023 was a strong year and a turning point for Metro. From a performance perspective, 4 key stats stand out, with our team laser focused on ramping up hiring after a stagnant period during the pandemic, as well as working with the Safety Commission and safely returning 7,000 series trains to service. We were able to ramp up rail service 11 times during the fiscal year. By the end of the year, we had the highest level of rail customer satisfaction in a decade, and 98% of rail customer trips were faster. Service improvements and the return and the growth of more activities in the region, work trips, tourism, sports and entertainment travel, have resulted in a 40% growth in ridership year over year. It's almost 200 million trips in FY23 compared to 142 in FY22. And our actions to improve personal safety and security in our system are paying off. Investments resulted in benefits in terms of crime reduction. Part 1 crimes peaked in February, driven in particular by a sharp increase in motor vehicle thefts, which is consistent with trends nationwide and challenges. Since that peak in February, we've seen a 20% drop in the crime rate.
So the full report provides performance details for over 15 KPIs that span all modes. Today, we're focused on a subset of measures, the measures in the blue. Customer satisfaction and ridership are 2 measures that align to our goals of providing excellent service and delivering value to the region. On-time performance, missed trips, prediction availability, and crime are main drivers of satisfaction and ridership. We hear that directly from our customers. And safety events and customer injuries are areas where we've aimed for continuous improvement and seen some over the course of the fiscal year. Full information on all these measures is provided in the report and in the appendix of this presentation. One note for those of us used to seeing red, green, and yellow as indicators of whether we met target, here you see blue, orange, and light orange. That's for colorblind members of the public and members of ourselves. For the handful of measures that we didn't set targets for, those are the ones with the gray dot, those will have targets for FY24. We didn't set targets this year. It was a new measure for us, and we wanted to have enough historical data to set an informed target. Okay, beginning with customer satisfaction. On rail, as Tom mentioned, we achieved kind of record highs since 2013 with 84% of customers satisfied with their last trip in Q4. This is a huge increase over the last 12 months, 15 percentage points. And we hear from our customers that it's driven by the service increases. We saw average wait times fall 43% over the course of the fiscal year. That means if you were waiting 10 minutes for a train in July, by June you were waiting 6. We also know that our customers have noticed an increase in the police presence, and that has also driven the numbers. And we have seen the number of officers in our system double over the course of the fiscal year. On bus and access, we saw relatively stable performance over the course of the fiscal year. It was below where we wanted to be. We had set the target to achieve kind of the 5-year average satisfaction level, but it was remarkably consistent with where we have been pre-pandemic 2017 to 2019. On bus, there's quite a few initiatives underway that address some of the feedback we've received from customers. I know you've received detailed presentations in the past few months on them. And on access, we continue to focus on improving customer service through training videos, and we have kept satisfaction with drivers high at 86%, agreeing that our drivers are courteous.
Moving on to ridership, we saw steady increases in ridership across bus and rail in FY23. We had the highest results in the Q4 of the fiscal year. We saw just over 750,000 trips on an average Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, our days of week with the strongest ridership. During FY23, we broke the post-pandemic ridership record on June 6th with about 809,000 trips. And we just broke this record again last week on September 20th with about 832,000 trips. We also set records for the busiest Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on Metro Rail, and the second busiest Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were the 3 busiest single days on Metro Rail since the pandemic. Metro Access ridership also grew slightly in FY23 at 7%. steady levels, but also customers continue to use Abilities Ride to travel, and we've seen growth in that program. FY23 also included a big expansion of the region's rail system with the opening of 7 new stations, including the Silver Line extension and Potomac Yard Station. And we had the major completion of the major rehabilitation project on the Yellow Line at the Potomac River. On the Silver Line extension, ridership is increasing on par with system-wide increases. Dulles Airport and Ashburn remain the most popular stations, with more than a third of the Silver Line Phase 2 trips starting or ending at Dulles, and a fifth of the trips starting or ending at Ashburn. So thousands of people are using Metro as a cheaper option to get to the airport every day. Metro continues also to play a significant role in regional events, including the 4th of July and the Pride Parade. We are currently operating our fully budgeted FY24 bus service and nearing our FY24 levels of rail service. We're excited to continue to grow ridership and look forward to getting back to 1 million or more riders a day. And we have the capacity out there in service to do so. We've built a service plan that offers high frequencies all day, every day, not just at peak or rush. We have estimates of what ridership could look like if federal government offices and workers continue to come back and return to the office, and we have the capacity to support that. We're monitoring both ridership and capacity for rail. Our average customer loads remain below 100 passengers per car, indicating that there is capacity to carry more customers. And on bus, we have, as I mentioned, are providing our full budgeted level of service on bus. There are some places where we are seeing buses at full seated capacity and crowding, and customers being passed by, particularly on a few key corridors, Georgia Avenue, 14th Street, the 96 bus, and a few other places around the region. If these conditions persist or worsen, we will need more resources above budgeted levels, or to be reallocating within the existing budgeted levels to help address some of that crowding.
So on-time performance for rail, as Tom mentioned, we had 11 service increases over the course of the fiscal year. And that meant that 98% of rail customer trips were faster in June 2023 compared to July 2022. However, we did fall short of our reliability target, which was 92% of customer trips on time. And that target had been set to improve over the 5-year average of 89%. So at 90%, we did improve over the 5-year average of 89%, just not quite as much as we had hoped to. We know that planned track work, that's kind of early out, or kind of track work that starts in the evening on weekdays, lowered on-time performance by about 1.4 percentage points. And the remainder are due to other kind of unplanned or disruptions. Customer incidents, those include sick customers, events. We saw a huge spike in calls related to police response this year. We had 3 times as many disruptions that led to some delay related to police response. On rail cars, we actually had very strong reliability on rail cars in fiscal year 23, with our 7K fleet traveling almost 69,000 miles between failure and Q4, and our legacy fleet traveling almost 20,000 miles between failure. While this does lead occasionally to disruptions, we're seeing strong reliability, so that has not, our performance this year is actually a little bit better than prior years in that area. On the signaling system, we did see twice as many signaling incidents that led to some sort of train delay this year, mostly with switches and track circuits. But the level we saw this year was around the same level that we saw in FY19 and FY20. Finally, I also want to mention that of the 10% of trips that were late, because we have improved frequencies over the course of the year, the severity of that lateness, how late customers are, also decreased by about 25% over the course. On bus, our target of 78% aimed to improve over the average performance of fiscal year 20 and 22, which was 77%. We just missed our target of 78% and came in at about 77% of bus service was on time, which, as I mentioned, was about the average that we've seen over the past few years. In FY23, we also increased service. We had targeted service increases on bus. And one thing that staff are actively doing right now is focusing on the top 10 most impactful and lowest performing routes to aim to improve on-time performance there. You can see on the line graph on this page that performance kind of dipped over the last 6 months, and we've been able to correlate that with an increase in traffic. So we've seen traffic worsen by about 3% in the region during this period. Traffic worsened, congestion worsened about 3% in the last 6 months. We particularly see that in the PM peak timeframe. And then one of the things that we are doing to kind of alleviate some of the impact of traffic congestion on our service is partnering with jurisdictions to implement and enforce bus-only lanes. We have installed cameras on 140 buses that service the 17 lane miles of bus lanes. And we anticipate, based on what we've seen with our peers, that this will result in about 7 to 31% improvement in bus speeds. It also will have a benefit to customers using wheelchairs, which along these routes, about 23% of wheelchair ramp deployments occur on these routes, by enabling buses to more consistently service the stops and deploy the ramps. The warning period is currently underway, and over the past 2 months, we've issued about 14,000 warnings. Metro Access met our target of on-time pickup, met our on-time performance target of no less than 92%. We had very strong performance all fiscal year, meeting target almost every month. We know this is driven by high vehicle availability that enables us to insert vehicles when needed to address trips that are running late. Also want to call out that excessively late trips remain low. These are trips that are greater than 20 minutes outside of the pickup window. One key highlight of FY23 is that we were able to make missed trips less than 2% on the bus service all fiscal year. And we actually saw improvements over the course of the fiscal year. And this is stellar performance, particularly when considering our peers have seen much higher levels of missed service between 5 and 15%. Keeping missed trips low was enabled by our robust hiring and training of new bus operators. Over 300 operators were hired, trained, and started driving buses in fiscal year 23, with even more currently in training. This has enabled us to replace bus operators who retire or separate from Metro. Our attrition rate or turnover rate is about 6% annually in this role. And bus operators also feed key positions, train operators, station managers, and also get promoted. So this robust hiring pace has enabled us to cover all the attrition as well as the transfers and promotions. On prediction availability, For kind of looking across 2023, we provided real-time arrival information for almost 94% of our scheduled bus trips. Performance peaked in March, and we saw a small, it fell in June, and I will give you a preview of the Q1 fiscal year 24 report. It has stayed low in July and August as well. What is behind this decrease is an increase in equipment and integration issues. It's not the GPS units on the buses themselves that are failing. It's sometimes we've seen an increase in loose wire connections that need to be fixed, as well as we've embarked on some state of good repair projects with other onboard systems, including our fare boxes, that require integration with this system and have experienced a few challenges there. We've been working with our vendors to address them, and including better training of their staff. Some of our vendors have also experienced some staffing shortages and have been working with them to ensure that they're fully staffed and have trained staff who can address these issues for us. Here, we focus on Part 1 crime, which fell 20% from February to June. Over the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we were performing at or near our target of no more than 6.5 Part 1 crimes per million passenger trips. That target was set to improve 5% over the average performance we had experienced between fiscal year 21 and 22. In January, we saw a steep increase, a 6-fold increase in motor vehicle theft, which drove up the crime rate. We also saw some smaller increases in the rate of robberies and theft and larceny. However, since this peak in February, we've seen the crime rate decrease steadily, improving by 20%. And we know this is due in part to our efforts to increase the visibility of security officers in the system, add additional support like crisis intervention specialists, and use techniques like scanning, analysis, response, and assessment, develop targeted interventions aimed at reducing crime in key areas. Closing out with safety, I wanted to highlight 2 measures here. The first, kind of the top set of graphs, is our system safety events rate. These are the number of safety events per 10 million revenue miles, and include things like, for bus, it's mostly collisions, same for Metro Access. And for rail, it includes also smoke and fire events, as well as maintenance vehicle derailments and collisions. For bus, we met our target, and our target had aimed to improve 15% over average performance over the last 5 years. Repeat for bus, we've improved 15% over average performance over the last 5 years. For Metro Rail and Metro Access, we did not meet our target, which was set the same way, but we saw significant improvements over the course of the fiscal year. For rail, the safety event rate fell 60% when looking at Q1 compared to Q4. And Metro Access, that number is 68%. On customer injuries, we met target for all 3 modes, and target there was aiming also to improve 15% over the average performance over the past 5 years. For rail, we actually had fewer injuries. Like when you count injuries, we had fewer customer injuries in fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22, 25% fewer. And we see most of those were slips, trips, and falls on escalators. So we had fewer slips, trips, and falls on escalators in fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22. This is despite the 40% increase in ridership, too. On bus, you can see the shape of the bus graphs for both the system safety events and the customer injuries are very similar. And that's because collisions are also the main injury type for customers. Similarly, Metro Access, it's also collisions are the most common injury type there. Finally, I wanted to close out with a reminder and announcement that we launched our Open Data Hub on WMATA.com in early July. This is a one-stop shop where you can find links to our performance dashboards as well as reports. We also launched 2 new performance dashboards in July. We launched Metro Pulse, which provides real-time performance information on our rail system. We're working hard to expand that to bus. And we launched our Service Excellence Dashboard, which allows customers to see performance information up to a week ago and drill into stats relevant to their trip. You can choose your own origin and destination on the rail system and see stats like your on-time performance as well as missed trips. You can also drill down into bus routes and see elevator and escalator availability at the station level. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Jordan. This has certainly proven to be, as I reflect, a tremendous year of impressive transformation anchored in transparency, in accountability, and in high performance. So we thank you for that. We thank the entire team for that. You've answered all of my questions, and I'll turn it over to any of our committee members that might have some. Dr. Lowe?
Yeah, what a great report. I'm so impressed with how many things are headed in the right direction. I just have a few questions, that some of which were addressed in the appendix, which I did read, but I want to just highlight for everyone. I think you emphasized the right things in the presentation, but could you surface for everyone what our trends are in employee injuries and assaults, given that this has been headed in the wrong direction in previous quarterly performance reports? I think that this is something that we need to continue to keep an eye on.
Sure thing. Let me get to that slide. Keep going. Okay, Metro Rail customer and employee assaults actually trended in the right direction, and we saw kind of a steady decrease since a peak in mid-fiscal year 22. And our target had been set to improve over fiscal year 22, so we clearly did that. I also want to mention here the rate. Not only did the rate decrease over fiscal year 22, but this is one where the number of assaults also decreased. So we had 4 fewer employee assaults in fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22, and 6 fewer customer assaults as well. So this is one where things have been trending in the right direction.
And that 678 station managers and rail operations supervisors who completed de-escalation training, did all that happen in the last 12 months?
That has been an ongoing effort over the last few years, but then it's also part of continuing to reiterate that in ongoing training.
So this is like some initial quantitative evidence that is consistent with the qualitative feedback that we've been getting from employees that this training is helpful.
Correct.
Thanks.
Did you want to talk about bus?
Well, we need to talk about the bus.
Great. So on bus, you can see in FY23 we were above target and remained above target most of the fiscal year. And again, the target had been set to improve over fiscal year 22. I do want to call out that we did see a decrease in employee assaults. So employee assaults were down 44%. The reason that the rate has increased is we saw a large increase in customer-on-customer assaults, kind of over 80% more customer-on-customer assaults in fiscal year 22.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. But it is, the nugget of good news in here is that the employee assault number is moving in the right direction. That went in the wrong direction quarter after quarter for a while. And this is really good news because we have got to protect our workforce. Fantastic. Can we say more about this, Randy? Maybe this is more of a question for you. Can we say more about when and how we would address bus crowding? We're seeing this surface in the performance report, but we're already at the budgeted level of service. Do we have any flexibility to do anything about this? Just feeling bad for everyone at the curb.
Yeah, so I'll make a comment, and then Tom, I think you're probably prepared to, your area, you've been looking at it very, very tightly. So We are in a kind of an unfortunate situation. We are running budgeted service for bus. I was just talking to Board Member Worth, who I know is a daily bus customer. I'm on the bus during the week, but not as probably much as Board Member Worth is. And like yesterday, I saw an S9 that we could not fit another human being on, packed, followed by 52 that we might have fit 3 or 4 more people on. And that's happening almost throughout the entire day on certain routes. The 50s, the S's, 70s, X2. There's a lot of people on
Nature
a
is
lot of
healing.
our. Nature is very much healing. So in the bus side, we are definitely challenged because we built an all-day, all-week network, and the peaks are actually pretty close to back to pre-pandemic. So we are gaining on bus ridership. We're above pre-pandemic on weekend, and we're getting close to being back to full pandemic, pre-pandemic during the day. So we cut a variety of routes. It's actually before I got here, and you may recall the routes were cut. Those ones we don't have any, and I know some want those back. As staff, we do not have any recommendation to the board in upcoming budget to bring those back. Those routes have been redeployed for these higher frequency networks. But we are kind of in a jam because I would love to deliver more bus service on like the 50s and the S's as an example. But to do that, we have to use overtime. And so the hiring is one thing, and then it's just nonstop overtime to fill those trips
It's
or
expensive.
make those trips. But at the same time, I have more or less an edict out to the staff of every single piece of overtime has to be managed as tightly as possible because we have to keep the 95 million of the savings last year and this really significant fiscal challenge we're going into FY25. So we're going to keep analyzing every block and try to be as efficient as possible. Leroy and the bus team are really trying to do that with the planning team and where we can be as clean and effective as each block. But I do think we have to tell our customers pretty openly and transparently, buses are probably only going to get more crowded, and that same trend is going to happen on the rail side starting next calendar year. As we start, if we have to do hiring freeze and any other fiscal measures, it's just no getting around it. Ridership is coming back, and our service will not be able to maintain if we don't have the funding available. So it's a challenging period. I don't know, Tom, do you have anything else to add? Or
I think you captured
did I hit it? Okay, thank you. Tom and I talk about this almost every day because it is a big challenge, and we do want to serve people. And you get to a point if people can't, it actually slows the buses down too, which hurts our on-time performance, and eventually gets people to not want to use the bus. So there's this a cyclical effect of not providing a consistent space on a bus to move.
So I think we do need to focus on every variable that is under our control that can improve bus reliability because it will at least help us manage crowding. I have 2 questions about that. Where are we with all-door boarding?
So all-door boarding, we're pretty close internally, ready to go on a couple routes with that. We're trying to get that paired a little bit with some of the new bus lanes that we're working really close with the district on. Obviously, there's a clear lane initiative. Tom's team and the bus team are working really closely with DDOT and other jurisdictions on everything from sometimes we want a left-hand turn to hold for 5 more seconds. We want queue jumps.
Let's get it right.
There's a lot of stuff, and I want to give a lot of credit. DDOT specifically, I think, Board Member Worth and a lot of people on the DDOT team are working hand in hand on a daily basis with our team. That can't be understated how much work is happening in the district. Everyone wants everything immediately, but there are little things and big things all happening at the same time. And I think that's fair to say across the river in Virginia and in Montgomery and Prince George's, that's also happening to some extent where there's choke points. But at some point, maybe what we could do is get a summation of all, a variety of all those kind of things we're working on and get that to the board.
Look, I'm willing to wait for something good. It doesn't have to be right now, but I appreciate the update.
Yeah.
But you mentioned clear lanes, right? And that's the other question here, which is if traffic's up 3%, OpEx per mile on the bus is going to go up. We're paying people to sit in traffic, right? It's also painful for the customers. So what is going on with clear lanes, and why are we still in the warning period?
So I just remembered 2 things. So on the buses, we've installed the cameras, but the actual ticketing, warnings, enforcement is all the district. So I would defer to the
I'm
district.
asking the wrong person.
I would just, meaning it's a partnership. I want to be very clear. We appreciate the partnership. The technology, I think we feel is ready to go. We got all the data sets ready. And so we're just collaborating with the district and it's up to them ultimately to do the enforcement, how much it is, all those types of things. That's not a WMATA thing. Legally, we don't have that area.
Okay, but to highlight, just in terms of bus performance, if we have 14K warnings in 3 months, did I catch that correctly?
I think more like 2 months, yes.
So 14K warnings in 2 months, that's like 300 or 400 warnings a day. So the buses they're getting stuck
Yeah, there's no question.
nonstop.
Yeah, we would love everyone to get out of the bus lane and get out of the bus stop. And I think we should all be saying that same message. How that gets done, there's a variety of ways, including clear lanes is one aspect. I've been out with the police myself doing clearing of lanes. We have bike patrol out there doing as much we can on ticketing. At the end of the day, we need people to show some basic human respect to an individual riding a bus, and especially someone that needs a wheelchair ramp. We sometimes can't serve the bus stop correctly, and we put someone that may have a disability in a less safe situation because we have, quite frankly, community members that are not respecting the public space for a bus stop.
Okay, I just got like a mental image of you like personally, physically, like pushing vehicles out of the way of buses.
If the board would so let, I'd have no problem towing vehicles at a first spot.
Okay, I mean, like all laughing aside though, you know, we gotta stop paying buses to sit in traffic. So let's look into that. Okay, thank you so much. This is really informative.
Thank you. Mr. Smedberg.
Thank you. Dr. Lowe asked one of my questions, but Jordan, just more of a point of information, I guess. When you mentioned you're just below, I think it was 78% target for bus due to the increase in traffic. Is that system-wide you're seeing that, or is it more the core?
We see increases in traffic system-wide. It is more pronounced in the core, but traffic is increasing region-wide, and we see it.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing that from all the electeds, you know, anecdotal, but obviously if you drive around at all, you can obviously see traffic is increasing. So we got to get more people on rail and bus. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Helfer?
Thanks. Thanks for this presentation. A lot of good information. I want to go back to the Metro Access ridership. And it seems like it seems to be inching up. And I just wonder, and maybe you don't have this data today, but what are we doing to help with eligibility assessment and travel training and helping people, you know, get comfortable and skilled in riding the bus and the rail that can?
We don't have that. I don't have that information today, so I'll follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal of Metro Access is to provide services for people that can't get to the bus, can't get on the bus, or can't independently use the system. And I think the goal is not to increase ridership, but to provide the service for the individuals that need it under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and equally provide opportunity for people to build the skills to use our typical systems on Metro Rail and Metro Bus. And so I support Metro Access for those who need to use it, but the inching up of ridership there is just a question. So thank you.
Yeah, Board Member, I guess my only comment on that would be, I think we're seeing an increase. And if that chart went back to FY19, then you would notice we're still down from FY19. So it's just increasing. During the pandemic, Metro Access really went down to purely, you know, life-saving critical kind of trips in one way. So we are getting towards what used to be. We're still actually down from what we used to be. But yeah, we have a pretty robust program here about assessment, travel training. Sometimes our partners do the travel training and versus us as well. But what I'll do is I'll ask, I think Brian Dwyer is in the room. I'll get Brian with Christian to write up something and get it over to you and the board.
That's helpful context how that all works. For pre-pandemic, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Klein?
Yes, thank you. Most of my questions have been answered already. I just have two. One, in looking at the bus customer satisfaction slide, there seemed to be a marked decline between quarter 1 and 2 of last year, and then actually, yeah, I meant this. Yeah. I can't read the numbers from here, but well, between Q2 and Q3, that's what it was. And then it sort of started to come down. I can't tell if that's sort of just.
It's not statistically significant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my. So in that case, great. It's looking good. And then similarly looking good is the information on missed trips, missed bus trips. Can you remind me how that's defined? Is that a scheduled trip that just doesn't start?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to highlight that for the room again, because in other transit systems around the country, that is a huge problem. I mean, there's the number one thing that bus riders are talking about is just how many of the trips are just not they can't take because the bus just isn't there. So it's really a testament to what Metro has done over the last year in terms of recruiting operators, getting them trained, getting them out to deliver the service. So I guess I just wanted to highlight that again. It's really a standout slide.
Thank you. Ms. Worth?
Thanks so much for the presentation. I always appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put into this. And I'm just going to continue with the bus conversation. It's great to see that the missed trips have dropped, to add to what board member Klein said. And I'm happy to see the work that you're doing around the availability, because that probably may also influence bus customer satisfaction, and being able to see on the real-time displayed signs or the app on your phone, even an app on Metro's website is really critical. So folks know when the bus is coming, even with the missed, even with the on-time performance challenges. I think that's just really important. So I'm glad that you're continuing to work on that.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, with no further business to come before the committee, we will stand adjourned. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Letourneau to begin the Finance and Capital Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer, and welcome to this morning's Finance and Capital Committee meeting. First order of business is approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections from members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our July 13th meeting before us for approval. Are there objections to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. Well, we have one item on our agenda this morning, and it's one that has been eagerly anticipated for quite some time, which is an update on fiscal year 25 and future year fiscal outlook. Obviously, we all know that we have a truly unique challenge that we're facing here with a significant deficit and fiscal cliff. Today, we're going to take a more detailed look at what these challenges are, what the root of them really is, and possible strategies to address them. This committee, in coordination with the general manager and staff, will continue to discuss the budget and potential scenarios for fiscal 25 throughout the fall. The general manager will likely introduce his proposed budget to us in December, and then we'll have our normal process of public input before adopting a budget in the spring. As we get into this, I just would like to thank staff, the general manager, Tom, Utende, the whole team, for the work that they've done, because as you'll see, and I think as has been covered over the last few days, Metro understands that we have a role to play in reducing our deficit and trying to address our fiscal cliff internally as much as possible. And there's been some really significant progress in doing that. But as the presentation will also make clear, we're going to need help from our jurisdictional partners to continue to operate the level of service that we are now and that the region needs. So with that, I will turn the floor over to our general manager, Mr. Clark, to introduce our item.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Letourneau, and I want to thank you and the board. There's been obviously a ton of conversations about this. We've had updates since June on the forecast, so I appreciate all your involvement, your leadership. Also want to thank all of our partners. You know, we have members of JCC here, but we have CAOs, COG, lots of other individuals in the region that take this topic very seriously because it's obviously the backbone of our region. So there's been an enormous amount of meetings and conversations, information requests, and just want to appreciate that you know, they all have day jobs too, doing other things. So they're putting a lot of effort into this, and I want to thank them as well. You know, I'll make this really quick because we want to spend mostly, obviously, Yutindy and Tom going through this deck. The parts that I want to really say is we are trying to lean into transparency. I think we did a good job of that last year with our budget process, or at least that was the intent. And if we didn't do it well, we're going to learn and get better on that. But we want to be early here. If December ends up being the budget proposal, and that's where the staff's plan is, we're trying to be transparent, early. We're not trying to bring anxiety and fear and shock. We're just using the data to drive a conversation that got to ultimately resolve in regional collaboration. You know, numbers are what they are. They're not emotional. They just have to be addressed straight on of what they are. We also understand that our budget, really, the predictability of our budget impacts our regional partners significantly. They can't do their budgeting without our budgeting. So there is a hand in glove approach to this. So again, leaning in to try to be early and collaborative with our partners. I do want to highlight that I want to make sure, and I know the board knows as well, but publicly we have to continually emphasize, we have a short and a long-term problem. Right now we are going to talk about FY25. FY25 is not the actual big elephant in the room. Don't get me wrong, it is very big. We'll name some other animal at the zoo, I guess, but it is a big, big problem for next July 1st. Solving FY25 may be a different path than our long-term solution, and it could be a multi-phased approach. But I just always want to emphasize publicly, we are not going to solve FY25 and then to solve all of our problems. I hear a lot from people that say, hey, Metro does this every few years. And I try to say this as honestly as can. Yes, Metro will continue to do this every few years until we solve the structural issue with Metro's funding. So this isn't a threat. It's not a thing on Twitter where someone goes, oh, you do it and you get the money. No, this is a structural problem identified in 1976. There's been some great work done across the last 40 years to either add things to it or tweak. Everything has cascaded now. The pandemic and historic inflation pulled all of this in, and we're dealing with it straight on right now. We have a structural issue, and we got to continue to emphasize the structural part. The last 2 points are, and I know this is pretty clear, but all of our decisions will have consequences. And we have to make everyone aware of that. And not doing something is a decision. And we have to be able to have a mature policy conversation of what those things will be. And the one thing that staff will do everything it can, so I want to reassure the public, but as we work towards the board budget proposal, protecting the service is what we are focused on. At the end of the day, we are a service delivery organization, and that's what we do. The staff has heard me over and over. If it comes to an administrative position versus a bus operator, every day of the week, we're getting a bus operator. If it turns into, protecting a rush hour service versus some other consultant thing that would be great, we're always going to not do the consultant thing, and we're going to protect rush hour service. Everything we can do to protect service, because once it starts being pulled back, the ability to return to good service levels is very difficult, close to impossible. And it's not just a money issue, it's a staffing, it's a technical skill. There's so many layers to this onion. So as we work through this process, we just want to reassure people that public at large, especially customers, we are going to do everything we can to protect the service. But there is no easy silver bullet on service. There's no just cut a little here and cut a little there and we solve the deficit. Most of it is variable cost, and the fixed cost is already there. So I've used analogy a few times. We built the fire station, we bought the fire trucks. The question is, are we going to use them or not? Or if we built the school and we have all the teachers, are we going to use them or not? Or whatever other analogy we want to use. So we've put a lot of money as a region into Metro. The question is, how are we going to maintain that investment to deliver the regional recovery from COVID? So really just also want to say thanks to Yutindy and Tom and the team. They put an enormous amount of effort in this. And with that, I'll defer to them to run through our slides. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Randy. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Yetunde Olumide, Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President. I'm joined by Mr. Tommy Webster, Executive Vice President, Planning and Performance. Again, we thank you for the opportunity to update you on Metro's finances. Today, we plan to cover three main areas. FY25 initial forecast and potential service impact, FY25 budget planning and considerations, and also budget scenarios, timeline, and challenges. Here we go. Okay. This operating deficit forecast slide is what was shared in June. It shows the structural deficit that Metro faces in FY25 and beyond. This problem is not new. Numerous white papers have noted that Metro's funding structure from inception lacked dedicated operating funding and was inadequate. This created uncertainty for both the authority and the funding jurisdictions. This challenge was made worse and accelerated by COVID due to the double hit of diminished revenue and also historic inflation. Metro was able to navigate this crisis thanks to federal relief depicted in gold. However, when that runs out, Metro faces a funding deficit that in June was estimated at $750 million for FY25. Metro's FY25 $750 million deficit can be broken down into three categories. 26% from the jurisdictional subsidy credit at the start of the pandemic, when Metro provided support to the jurisdictions, thus reducing the overall subsidy and foregoing 3% increases. 38% from decreased revenues from ridership, fares, parking, and advertising since the pandemic, and 36% from inflation and Metro's contractual commitments. As you recall, back in June, inflation has been a large contributor to the deficit for Metro, like other transit agencies. It has impacted the expenses of everything, including labor and fuel. Metro's collective bargaining agreements that govern compensation for the majority of Metro's employees are also indexed to inflation.
This slide is also from back in June. It shows how, due to the economics of transit, the fixed variable cost and infrastructure heavy environment that we're in, that the only way to cut enough service to close or eliminate a gap of this size, 750 million, is with devastating service cuts and layoffs. Means not just much worse service, but a much worse customer experience. These cuts would only eliminate the deficit, assuming that the region and the jurisdictions continue their full subsidy amounts, but they'd be paying for substantially less service. Customers would, of course, abandon the system. Ridership would stop growing. Things would be very crowded. And we would not be able to carry the number of customers that anywhere close to what we're carrying today.
Now we'll go over the budget planning considerations for FY25. Key decisions in FY25 will include fares and service levels, which were last adjusted for the current fiscal year FY24. Metro's board sets fare and service levels. Other ways Metro can address the deficit include closely managing expenses now, as we have been doing, and for the remainder of FY24 to maximize potential carryover, identify further cost reductions that can impact FY25 and beyond, explore the right level of operating maintenance that can be reimbursed by the capital program, look at potential replacement of federal smart benefits revenue. We'll get into this in greater detail in the following slides.
So Metro's service optimization efforts have focused in three areas: strengthening the regional network with better all-day and all-week service, rail and bus, providing access to more destinations, faster travel to jobs and opportunity, and making better use of Metro's assets by maximizing the infrastructure and the equipment that the region has already invested in. You can see the results of that in the performance report that the board just received. Moving into FY25 and into this process, we intend to continue this optimization and efficiency effort, making Metro Rail more agile and nimble and adapting to when service is needed. So we're beginning to analyze a number of things, including the duration of peak periods and adapting, continuing to adapt to when customers travel, analyzing the length of train cars in service, again, to gain some efficiencies potentially in having different train lengths, 4, 6, and 8 car trains on different lines or different times of day. And then again, analyzing our hours of operation and those places where we have, for example, multiple entrances to a single station. Are there opportunities to close some of those entrances on certain lower ridership, lower customer times of day or days of week? You mentioned the Better Bus Network redesign again earlier. Of course, this was called for in the 2017 Ray LaHood report, our bus transformation project, and we've been underway now for a little over a year with first the visionary network and now developing the one-year network. Of course, this is an opportunity to make our bus service more productive and efficient and better for our customers and potential customers. It's also with the financial uncertainty becoming more and more challenging to develop those plans and plan for that transition.
Today, Metro has $95 million more in one-time savings than originally forecast when the FY24 budget was approved. These are the result of cost management in areas including but not limited to contract service management, office consolidation, termination of leases where it makes sense, and vacancy and personnel expense management. These accumulated one-time savings can help bring down the FY25 deficit. We also formed an internal task force with the goal to identify an additional $50 million in ongoing expense reductions for FY25 and beyond. These savings will not impact safety or service levels, and we've identified 4 main efficiency categories. Administrative efficiencies worth $30 million, reduced consulting services, digital transformation efficiencies, and improved asset management. I'll go through these in more detail. Here's a closer look at the administrative efficiencies we're advancing, which are worth about $30 million savings in 25 and grow to $365 million in subsequent 10 years. We're considering warehouses and other facilities, reducing staff, and building maintenance needs. We're also consolidating multiple call centers into a unified platform, a modern call center focused on our customers. This is scheduled to go live in Q4 of FY24 with the telephone number 202-GO Metro. We've reduced our non-revenue vehicle fleet and will continue to make further reductions as we proceed. We're also reducing the amount we spend on consultants, reducing staff augmentation where it makes sense as well, and leveraging more in-house capabilities, right-sizing on some of our cleaning contracts, reducing the scope on interior deep cleaning with seat covers, changing from cloth to vinyl. We're modernizing Metro and getting efficiencies as well by eliminating duplicative software licenses and right-sizing what we need to spend on IT-related service contracts. Lastly, we're leveraging the region's investment in state of good repair. getting savings on track repairs thanks to improved preventive maintenance, and also elevator and escalator improved life cycle management, resulting in reduced repair costs. So in summary, these savings build on Metro's focus on efficiency and will help bring down the FY25 deficit. In prior years, we had attained over $300 million in savings, and this $50 million cost efficiency task force work will increase that to $358 million.
So in addition to that substantial 50 million and ongoing cost savings potential, there are a number of things that Metro and governments in our region could advance to help reduce Metro's costs and grow its revenues over the long term, thus helping to manage our long-term budget. They include aligning regional energy policy, rates, and fees. Metro is a very large user of energy in our region, but we're also a very efficient one. So revisiting some of the regional policies on that. As we discussed earlier this morning, regional implementation of bus priority treatments and bus priority lanes. Reciprocity and police certification and standardization and simplification of regulatory requirements and inspection requirements for elevators and escalators. So again, in the medium term, potential for standardization across the region and some efficiencies and cost savings. Also, revenue opportunities in both advertising and policies around zoning and density at and near transit stations.
Okay. So this slide looks at the impact of inflation on the operating budget. We monitor changes in inflation, and our assumptions are based on indices from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which help us plan for goods and services and contractual requirements. Each percentage decrease in inflation saves Metro approximately $23 million. We'd like to partner and align with Metro's inflation assumptions with that of our regional governments as well, and we'll continue to do so.
Again, in terms of federal ridership and fare revenue, in FY19, Smart Benefits revenue from federal employees generated roughly $100 million in revenue for Metro's operating budget. In FY25, it's expected to be around $50 million at our current trends and trajectory. So there's an opportunity if the federal workforce comes back to the levels seen in FY19 for about a $50 million revenue gain from that ridership.
Preventive maintenance, as you know, is an eligible activity for reimbursement under FTA guidance. Considerations include the maximum amount of preventive maintenance costs to be transferred from the operating budget to the capital budget and is set annually. Short-term maintenance activities do not change, but the budget allocation between operating and capital can be adjusted. Increased use of PM transfers reduces capacity for other capital investments in the long term. $345 million is the maximum potential preventive maintenance amount Metro has identified that could be transferred in FY25. And this slide shows how Metro's use of the PM transfer compares to peer agencies in terms of dollar amounts and as a percentage of their respective operating budget amounts. Historically, Metro was at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of PM transfer amounts as a percentage of total operating budget, but has moved to more middle territory while still not the highest. This slide shows the historic utilization of PM transfer at Metro, which is in most years prior to FY24 was set at $60 million. The maximum eligible, again, identified potentially for FY25 is the $345 million.
So So increasing the use of federal grants for preventive maintenance would have the effect of reducing capital program capacity over the 6-year capital program period. Our capital programs funded by federal grants, formula and PREA, contributions from the region, and dedicated funding and debt that leverages that dedicated funding. Our previous projections had that capacity for dedicated funding debt running out in roughly the FY29 time period. The use of up to $345 million of federal grants and the associated shuffling of the program would result in that capacity running out in roughly the FY28 time period. So it reduces overall program capacity. Of course, the region, the federal government, and Metro have made substantial investments in the safety, state of good repair, reliability, and modernization of the Metro system over the past several years, with capital investment levels increasing each year for at least the past 7. And again in FY23, the year that just ended, Metro met just under 100% of the investment level projected for that year. So continued significant progress in the state of good repair and reliability of the system. That reduced capacity and the potential for further reduction in capacity of the capital program certainly puts many of our modernization and some of our state of good repair projects that are on the horizon at risk. Our heavy repair and overhaul facility, that is a modernization program to improve efficiency and enhance the state of good repair of our rail car vehicles. Our 8000 series rail cars, so we have ordered a base order. There are options for the replacement of additional 3000 series rail cars and potential expansion rail cars. Those would be at risk. Our zero emission bus transition beyond the Northern and Bladensburg and facilities that are underway today, and Cinderbed that will get started soon. All of the facility and vehicle investments beyond that are at risk. Our signaling system, again, you heard earlier in our performance report, one of our more antiquated systems and highest priorities for state of good repair, and then eventually modernization and replacement. The outlook for that in a constrained capital environment is pretty dire in terms of new investment in a new modern system. And then our plans for future transit expansion to support growth in the region, sustainability and equity, and growing transit ridership would essentially be at risk of being on hold for lack of funding.
Now we'll go through FY25 budget scenarios, timelines, and challenges. This slide shows 3 scenarios that mainly vary based on the level of preventive maintenance transfer. Starting at the top, they all assume a $95 million in one-time savings through the end of FY24 that can help bring down that deficit. At the same time, we're trying to right-size FY24 revenue assumptions for prevalence of shorter trips, lower average fare that we've seen to date offset against our expectation that new fare gates will convert a large proportion of fare evasion trips to paid trips for a net decrease of $45 million. Then we reflect $50 million in new cost efficiency savings for FY25 being identified by the task force. I went through that a few slides back. Finally, we show PM transfer options, including the historic $60 million base amount, the $199 million approved for FY24, and a potential $345 million, which we estimate to be the maximum level that could be transferred in FY25. Please note that these would be subject to FTA approval.
Can we just pause for 1 second on that? We keep saying that that's the maximum amount. Exactly what is that based on?
Thank you. So that's based on eligible activities as defined by the FTA for what could be under the umbrella of preventive maintenance. So when we take a hard look at our maintenance activities and go through the labor costs associated with those, we come up to about $345 million.
And it's important to understand that if that is transferred, it doesn't mean that those activities would not occur. It only means that we're counting it essentially in a different bucket of our budget.
That's absolutely correct. We continue to work on our preventive maintenance. The amount of preventive maintenance we do does not decrease as a result of the transfer.
Okay, we have some historical issues in this agency over this, so I just wanted to make that clear. Please continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thus, we get to deficits of $650, $510, and $65 million respectively. Below the line, we show two other areas that could further reduce the deficits, including the inflation savings we discussed, from a 1% decrease in inflation and potential to replace the federal employee SMART benefits revenue to get back to their FY19 levels. As of August, inflation from the CPI is right about 3.4%. So we're watching that closely. The next three slides really just go into some detail about what the preliminary estimates would look like for an operating subsidy allocation. And I'll go quickly to the third one in review, looking at PM at the eligible maximum we have right now of $345 million. So this slide shows how the remaining $365 million deficit in scenario C would be split using the historic formula and how the potential impact of lower inflation and federal SMART benefits recovery could further reduce that subsidy need. These projections here, or these estimates, do not include debt service. Now we look at the average annual growth for regional transportation agencies operating budgets from 2019 through 2024. During this period, Metro's operating budget grew an average of 4.8%, below the average pair average of 7%, while at the same time, Metro was launching major service improvements, including Silver Line Phase 2, Potomac Yard, and frequent service network on bus. This slide does the same benchmarking using regional and state government operating budgets as well. As you can see, Metro's average annual growth of 4.8% was below both averages for state and local governments. As mentioned previously, roughly half of Metro's operating funding comes from jurisdictional subsidies. To provide predictability to Metro's funding jurisdictions, Metro in 2017 recommended capping annual subsidy growth to 3%. In 2018, the region came together to approve a historic dedicated capital funding. Virginia and Maryland conditioned their dedicated capital funding on a 3% cap with limited exceptions. Now we look at the impact of the credit or subsidy reduction Metro provided to the jurisdictions beginning in FY21 and its lasting impact on Metro's operating finances. The top half of the table shows the approved subsidy levels by year, including FY21's $135 million credit. The table below shows what the subsidy would have been by year without providing the credit and foregoing subsidy growth over 2 years, FY21 and 22. Due to the compounding impacts, what started as $135 million in FY21 is now worth $190 million in FY24 on an annual basis and $690 million cumulatively. This means if the credits had never happened, Metro would have drawn down federal relief slower and would not experience a significant deficit until FY26 instead of FY25. This slide just shows the year-over-year change of approved base subsidy for current year subtracted by the previous year's approved subsidy. Here we see that Metro maintained a 3% growth in 19 and 20. We dipped down to minus 6%, which includes that credit I described in the prior slide, a 0% growth in 22, and then we continue to assume the 3% thereafter, while CPI grew to 6 and 9% respectively in FY21. Metro continued to manage with a 3% and lower than that growth in those years. This next slide is just the cumulative view of, again, what that credit looked like in FY21 and the credit growth from 21 and beyond.
So looking at the budget timeline and our next steps, over on the right-hand side, Metro must have a board-adopted balanced budget effective July 1st. Backing up from there, over the next couple of months, we'll be discussing, as we mentioned, some service efficiency concepts, potential fare change concepts, and refining projections, leading to a GM CEO set of proposed budget scenarios in December. With the significant uncertainty with both the 3% subsidy growth cap in Maryland and Virginia and the substantial need for increased operating budget funding next year, we need to begin planning and really mobilizing for potential layoff notices to staff and a potential hiring freeze in January. The consideration of potentially very drastic service reductions through a public hearing process and a Title VI equity analysis would follow. And then we would move to finalizing service plans in March and April. And typically the board would consider and approve the budget in the April timeframe. That would be followed by Metro's grant applications for federal funding, which in this scenario would include the change in preventive maintenance. And then the implementation of the new service plan and those potential layoffs in advance of July 1st. So to emphasize some of those key points again, the tight timeline of the budget cycle, the 3% cap, and other challenges present some particular challenges for budget development this year and for service looking forward. Again, the board must adopt a balanced budget effective July 1st to avoid dramatic service cuts. The 3% subsidy growth cap that's in law in Maryland and Virginia would require a one-time adjustment of that baseline subsidy for FY25. The budget calendar, the service plan, our collective bargaining agreements don't all align well with the jurisdictional legislative calendars. Those cycles start late this year, where our budget cycle is starting now. And the alignment challenges and the funding shortfall will cause significant challenges with layoffs, hiring, and training. We expect that and are really concerned about the implications for service, for reliability, performance, service reductions, and ultimately impacts to our customers and the region. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes our presentation.
Thank you. All right, lots to digest there. I think obviously the presentation clearly shows the need for help from our partners to address the shortfall, or there will be consequences to service for sure. Let's start with members of the committee. If you have questions, comments. Director Klein.
Thank you for this presentation. I just want to say at the outset that I really appreciate how straightforwardly you laid it out without, I mean, there's no sugarcoating here. It's pretty stark and clear. And the thing that I just really wanted to highlight, which was a little bit new in my thinking, is just how soon the impacts could be felt of this challenge. Because in my head, I've been thinking, oh, we have until next July. We don't have until next July. Impacts are going to start to be felt in January, according to the timeline you showed. And even potentially before that. I mean, anyone who's worked in a place where layoffs are starting to be discussed, the impacts are felt as soon as that starts to be discussed. So this is real and now. On the preventive maintenance side, you know, I was definitely supportive of doing that switch in the for FY24's budget. I've emphasized several times that I didn't want it built into the baseline for this time, which you didn't do. You have clearly articulated different scenarios, different levels of maintenance. That also highlights what the general manager was saying about how this might end up being a two-phase solution, in which we address FY25 and like a large preventive maintenance transfer, which obviously doesn't address the whole gap, but part of it. But by doing so, we create a bigger long-term challenge on the operating and the capital side, particularly. So I actually really didn't have any questions, but those were the two takeaways that I took particular notice of in this presentation, and I wanted to thank you for articulating them so clearly.
Thank you.
Mr. Smedberg.
Thank you. Tom and Yatende, your second bullet there. Could you go a little more into detail on why that is so important for us? You know, and if that doesn't happen, what are the implications?
I can go back. Go ahead.
So I think the key here is that even if the funding were available, the cap would prevent Virginia and Maryland from increasing funding to the levels that are required to support the budget next year.
Yes, so Mr. I'll add.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure people understood.
Yeah, that's the technical piece. So basically what we're saying here is even if, you know, Northern Virginia localities or the Commonwealth or Maryland, because it's state funded, had the funding available in the budget, until the law is changed, they are not able to transfer or allocate that to Metro. And so what we are saying is without the one-time adjustment of the baseline subsidy, we are going to get into draconian service cuts. So funding is one topic, but the legislative piece is actually more important than the funding piece, because you can't do the funding without the legislative piece. So it is an A-B that has to happen. It's a legislative and a funding piece. And without that change, there's no getting around it. It's binary. We are into significant service cuts next July.
Yeah, understood, but I think it's really clear that we emphasize that point so everyone has a baseline understanding of the importance of that whole. And I also I appreciate what Mr. Letourneau said about the preventive maintenance. You know, just so people understand, we have an historic issue with this here, and we do not want to go down that path. And it's important for people to understand that we are still going to perform preventive maintenance and critical safety, state of good repair, all that kind of good stuff. But there is a one-time opportunity here.
That's accurate, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. McAndrew.
Thanks. It is tough to imagine that we are 5.5 years on from the historic move that this region made to secure dedicated capital, and now we're in position to potentially have to flex funding over to keep the lights on. So I think it's dire and presents it as such. So thank you. One question, if you can. Budget schedule challenges that are on the slide are real. We can't change them, but they're out there now. Maryland's home to over 9,000 WMATA employees. This could go to the DM as well. What work is being done or communication is being done with the union employees ahead of today's discussion and to ensure that they understand that this is in partnership?
Yeah, I think great question, Board Member McAndrew. So we are in constant communication with our labor partners. All the labor union leaders have got multiple detailed briefings just on not only on this deck, but thematically of all the financial parts. I'd like to think that there is alignment around everyone realizing that everyone is going to have to be coming together for the solution. That means different things to different people, obviously, and different things on different timelines because different CBAs exist. We do have our largest union, 689, is our current contract ends the end of next June. So it does align with this next fiscal year. But there's obviously significant growth challenges that have already been baked in some ways. So like the inflation part is a good example. If we didn't have historic inflation the last few years, then that part of the contract wouldn't have been seen as a problematic because it wouldn't have been such a big leap based on the COLA adjustments, right? So we are working as collaborative as we can with that, and I am trying to emphasize it's going to be a non-representative, representative, everyone coming together on this. But I think at the same time we got to respect the fact that we have a lot of great individuals that have sacrificed a lot and that are working very hard and deliver the region, service the region. So in a lot of ways, I'll be honest, as the general manager, I mean, like it's a tale of two cities kind of scenario. In one way, we're talking, the performance report, which is, I think, quite frankly, a very, very great year for this agency in meeting all of our safety measures, delivering great service, reliability's up, ridership's going. And the morale is improved and people are really contributing. And over here, telling people that, hey, with even all your good work, next year we may have to lay some of you off and not have hiring for backfill. That is a very hard dual message, I think, to Director Klein's point of view, to keep morale up, keep people that have a lot of tenure that could retire from not retiring, a lot of on-the-job experience there that we don't want leaving at once. So, there's layers to this that's not just about money, for sure. And the deeper we go with a hiring freeze, the longer it will take to dig out. So, but we are all trying to work together on this.
Okay, Director Lowe, and then I'll go back to you, Paul.
Right.
All right, so one of my questions was already answered. The 3% cap is statutory. WMATA is legally required to pass a balanced budget. So if we don't address the 3% statutory cap, then we legally have to adopt some version of a doomsday budget. So I just want to acknowledge that this is just going to be a really insane year for your teams, because you're preparing a lot of different scenarios. The same team that usually prepares one budget is now going to be preparing a lot of scenarios. And even once we get into the doomsday piece, like there's going to be some crazy scenarios there too. So I hope everyone trained physically for this moment. It just seems like it's going to be really hard. Regarding the FY25 service, we have already eliminated low-performing bus routes and realigned bus service. That already happened in previous fiscal years. We're now looking at Metro Rail service optimization in order to achieve some savings in that mode. I saw the FY25 paratransit contract as 9.6 million in administrative efficiencies. So that would, we could achieve 9.6 million in savings while still delivering the same level of Metro Access service?
That's accurate, and we're able to do so by, again, leveraging what we do with Abilities Ride and shifting trips over where applicable.
Okay. So have we looked at what we could save if we reduced Metro Access to only the federally mandated service area for FY25? Or would that prevent us from getting this administrative savings via Abilities Ride?
We can definitely look into that and provide you with a response.
Just a rough dollar figure. I understand that this is all extremely hypothetical. Looking ahead to the PM transfer, can we get like a literal list, not just the illustrative list, but like a literal list of the capital projects that are delayed or foregone because of the different levels of PM transfer? I realize that I'm asking for a lot of optionality here. I'm sorry. It's okay if it's like not possible or if this is just all too hypothetical, but this would really help people understand what choice we're making here. You know, so like I just feel like it's useful optionality and not like a game.
Yes, certainly this fall, we intend to lay out scenarios and concepts. These aren't, straight one-to-one things.
Right.
There are considerations.
There'll be optionality within the optionality.
Correct. Yes.
I just think it will help people make the choice it will help people choose what they want. Our ability to manage within the 3% cap for years with high inflation, it feels at first like confirmation that there was a lot of room to save in our budget. And I don't think it makes fully clear why we're sure the time is now that we can't tighten the belt any further. But is that because we hit the wall a while ago and it's only the federal relief that's been holding us up?
So, Dr. Loh, if you recall, each of the prior years, even prior to COVID, we have worked with leadership and the board where applicable on management savings. I pulled up a slide that came up with, it was $308 million prior to FY24. So we have been doing that historically, and we've been managing the budget that way. During the height of COVID, yes, the federal relief came to our rescue. To date, we've drawn about $2 billion to cover the gaps that we've had in the past few years.
We've eaten the seed corn. That is what it is. Okay, that's all my questions for now.
Spring? No. Okay. You're good? Okay. Oh, Rhina. Yes.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate all the other questions. Just a couple of thoughts, not to necessarily reflect today, but just as you consider scenarios. Are there other transfers that we can make short term using capital funds or other federal funds for operating in the short term, just as a gap measure? So that's just one thought.
Let's rob a bank. What can we do?
I'm just putting it out there. Are there other?
We already have the money trains.
Are there other
so
sources of revenue that we could explore as we think down this road? Are there other contracts and administrative issues? So I'll just use small ones. Public engagement contracts, for example. You know, just little things that, not to stop public engagement, but are there things that we could do internally that we currently use external contractors for? Just food for thought. And then just for everyone's clarification, I understand the 3% but the legislative calendar, what are the dates on that? If someone could just elaborate so everyone understands the timetable and the restriction.
I'll jump in on with that, board member. So one, I think this idea of reducing consultant capacity as needed is something that actually is reflected in the administrative. I think it's fair to say the team is diving very deep. And that's not to say consultants or contracted support isn't incredibly important or helped us significantly over the years, but we have to, every cushion has been flipped, and we're going to continue to do that. On the legislative calendar, again, not a government affairs expert by any means, so I think I got this right, and Regina will tell me offline later if I got it wrong, but generally speaking, we could start with Maryland first, I believe, and Board Member McAndrew could jump in. So there is not an election in Maryland this year, so session will start, I believe, in early January. I believe the governor's budget proposal is around the third week, give or take, of January, but in that time frame. And they have their session. On the Virginia side, it's the quote-unquote long session in Virginia. So there's a big election, obviously, for I think all Senate and delegates, I think, are up this year in November. The way my understanding works, pre-filing in Maryland actually I think is already kind of starting. Pre-filing in Virginia will start post-election for legislative bills. I believe the governor proposes his budget to the money committees December 20th in Virginia. And I believe I have that correct. And then obviously the session would be in January. So, so that's generally where both of those two align. And if I got them off by a couple dates, that's the general alignment.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Spring.
Thanks for the presentation. I just had a question about the bus lane implementation expenses. Are those mostly around the cameras in the district, or are there other regional costs or what's their lanes?
So most of the investment and the costs associated with bus priority infrastructure is the jurisdiction's investments in the roadways. Metro has some capital investment in things like cameras, devices, technology on the buses for bus priority, but in the scheme of things, that's smaller scale to the infrastructure investments in roadways.
Okay. So, but with the travel time savings that you'll hopefully get, ideally, from the investment that Metro makes in the cameras and maybe some signals, that will help offset some of that expense, correct?
That's right. It makes the buses moving faster and more freely makes our service more efficient, and then that can lead to cost savings, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spember?
Yeah, thank you. Tom or Yatunde, adding on to something Tracy just said, getting that illustrative list of PM, but your slide here with the capital transfers, could we put just a percentage of where they are in terms of the timeline, like, the heavy rail and overhaul facility? Is that 30% along the way? Is it 60% along the way? And the reason I'm asking, we have the 8,000 series fleet here for the future. The state of Maryland obviously has a big interest in this, given that Hitachi's going to be, or is, building a facility there, all the jobs that are going to come. Where are we along that timeline? So, I mean, just a general percentage. Doesn't have, just out of curiosity. If, hopefully we won't get to this point, but if we do have to get to this point, it would be good to understand where we are along in a timeline for these capital projects.
Sure. So we can follow up with more detail on others, but I can address those two quickly. We have acquired the property for the heavy the rail maintenance facility, and have been planning, designing, and engineering that facility. So we're at the point, or approaching the point where we would ordinarily be moving to construction. Of course, if we were to forego that and then try to revisit it later, it would be at a much higher cost, and we would lose the efficiency gains that we would have from that facility in the interim. So very much a project underway, not yet under construction. The 8,000 series railcars we have awarded the base contract, and similarly the planning and design of the new railcars is underway. The facility is built. The decisions around option awards are approaching, and in our current capital program, the first option that would allow us to replace more of the 3,000 series cars that were put in service in the mid-'80s, that first option comes up soon. And again, if we due to lack of funding, weren't able to do that, it would push future rail car acquisitions into the future and at a higher cost. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, I just want to say, like Ms. Klein said, there is such an urgency here to this. There's no way to sugarcoat this. But I think that, Metro cannot do this alone. And I think I really want to applaud the general manager and, Regina and you, the two of you, and everyone else that helped in this effort to get to this point, because this has been a lot of work. But getting out there and briefing people on this and helping them understand the entire scope of this issue and, what it all means, not only for Metro, but, for the region. And, but we need everyone to come to the table, business partners, jurisdictional partners, whomever is interested in this to get this done, because, it's going to take everyone. I also want to highlight, the elected officials, and particularly our federal delegation at this point has been really engaged in this and has been really, hopefully will be helpful down the road as we all again come together, hopefully. But again, Metro can't do this on its own. There's got to be leadership coming from all these other parties to really get this done. So.
Okay. Mr. Clark, yeah, and then I just wanted to say one more thing.
So I just wanted to recap where we are. So thank you so much for the time with the board today to go through this pretty detailed piece. The goal here is staff to come back in October. In October, we'll have the next forecast, so i.e. how we doing with inflation, ridership, some of those factors. We're also going to have then the first kind of, if you will, layout of the 6-year capital plan to go into what multiple board members are just trying to, what are those decision-making pieces? Obviously, we can't cut something that's currently under construction or under contract, and we are certainly not going to cut state of good repair, critical safety maintenance items. So it will get filtered to a smaller amount of things that have to have these deferment conversations. But that was the plan for October, which would then lead to a November update. November, again, I think we're going to have as close to certainty as we're going to get to around things like inflation and ridership and fare revenue. Hopefully maybe some action towards the federal fare recovery piece, but we're going to keep working on all those. And then that would lead ideally to a December general manager budget proposal. And I put S on that because I think right now we are definitely working on a 2-scenario budget proposal. One, assuming we have the cap and the funding resolved, and one that will actually say the cap and the funding is not resolved, and the corresponding significant cuts that would happen with that. So just publicly, I think a lot of us have talked, but laying out, we started this in June for FY25. This is another step, October, November, and December. So we have many opportunities to have this conversation, and each one we hope the numbers will continue to get more certainty around them as we get closer into the budget process. So thank you.
Mr. Alexander had a quick question on that.
Just real quick, we were talking about the budget and an update in October. In October, we hope that the federal government will be open. But I just wanted to kind of illuminate just a thought and just make sure I understand this correctly. WMATA services will not be harmed currently from a federal government shutdown. We can continue to run service. But in terms of this financial outlook, foregone trips from federal workers going into the office due to a federal shutdown will impact the bottom line and the negative trajectory.
There's no getting around it. So starting Monday, if the federal government shuts down, we will have less people on the system. Generally, all those people pay their fare. Contractors and support of the federal workforce would be probably impacted as well. And so every $1 million that we lose on fare starting on Monday will be $1 million that we're going to have to make up some other way. And it's just so timing probably couldn't be worse on a federal government shutdown as we're just hitting our stride on recovery.
Yeah.
Let's hope it doesn't happen.
Well, and I think it's a good time to say we do not have a fiscal reserve. I know that the general manager would like to have a fiscal reserve, and I, as a finance chair, would like to have a fiscal reserve, and Mr. Smedberg, as the board chair, and everybody else up here would like to have a fiscal reserve. We haven't been in a position to do that because we need to spend, yes, and our CFO would like to have a fiscal reserve. Well, we haven't. This isn't because WMATA is incompetent and nobody here thought of that. It's because every single dollar that we've had to receive in subsidy, we've had to spend to actually keep our trains running. And that's why we don't have a fiscal reserve. So as part of a reform process, I would very much like to develop one and start planning from a fiscal standpoint of actually putting money into reserve in case we have a future government shutdown or something like this. Just on a yearly budgetary basis, that wouldn't throw us way off for the year, and we have some money. So that's point number one. Point number two is, it seems like from a timing perspective, the doomsday scenario budget is going to have to be prepared regardless, because even if the 3% cap is lifted, we're not going to know the outcome of that until well into the spring, potentially. And so we won't have certainty that that is happening. That's one piece of it. The second piece is, of course, where the money is actually coming from. And that, part of what we're trying to do by being very transparent about putting these numbers out, and then the meetings that we've been having with our elected leaders and administrative leaders and others, and we will continue to have, is to be very transparent about what the need is, so that those funding partners can start working now on how to meet that need if they're so inclined. And at the end of the day, it is their decision. It's the state decisions, it's the locality decisions. I think our job is to try to do as good a job as we can actually running Metro and showing that we can provide the level of service that the region needs, being as efficient as we can in doing it. But ultimately, it's up to all of our partners in terms of what really happens here. And I think that's an important point to keep making, because a lot of our riders and the public doesn't really understand necessarily how all this works. So I'm going to keep saying that. The last question I had, because if you make the mistake, and why do I keep doing this? I look at the comments section of an article, in this case, it's Lori article, and all anybody wants to talk about is fare evasion. If Metro just collected more money in fare evasion. So I know that we've been rolling out our fare gates. I know that we have some new numbers that show that actually it's been, if anything, exceeding expectations in terms of revenue. But do you want to just sort of comment on that briefly, and the role it can play in helping to get us a little additional revenue?
If it'd be okay, that is my general manager report.
Okay, well then
wait,
we're going to hold to
few
that.
minutes,
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
I think to the theme you're getting at, board member, is fares will not solve this problem. Should we collect every single fare we can? Yes. Are we trying to do that? Yes. Will I ever collect every fare? Absolutely not. We will be fare evasion forever at this transit system and every other transit system. We are trying to reduce that to I don't want to say a manageable level, but certainly a level that I think generally society would accept, and try to get as much fare revenue. So I'll go through the numbers.
Okay, perfect.
But we are definitely feeling pretty good about where we are now with, at least on the rail side, the solution set around recovering fares.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? Thank you for all the work so far. Obviously, we will continue this conversation. So with no further business to come before the Finance Committee, we stand adjourned. The board meeting's up next. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break to allow some guests to join us and to recalibrate for that meeting. So we are adjourned.
Okay, good morning. It's still morning. I'm Paul Smedberg, Chair of the WMATA Board. Thank you for being here today at our Board of Directors meeting. Since we called the roll earlier during our committee meeting, we'll move right ahead to the approval of the agenda. I would like to move the agenda with the addition of one additional administrative item, rescission of early opening, late closing policy. Can I get a second? Seconded by Mr. Drummer? Letourneau, sorry. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved as amended. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes for approval. Board meetings from July 27th and September 14th, and executive sessions from August 29th and September 14th. I'd like to consider these minutes approved as presented. Does anyone have any comments or objections to any of those sets of minutes? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Before we move on to our next item, I'm going to take a point of privilege here and ask Mr. Sheehan, our ACC. Is Patrick here? Oh, he's on screen. Okay.
There we go.
He has a hard stop at noon, so we're going to let Patrick.
Yes.
Patrick, I hear you. I thought I heard you, but I don't see you, or we don't see you.
All right. I'm sorry. Let me.
That's good. We can hear you.
All right. Very good. Is this I'm sorry. I got trying to get my microphone together here.
Oh, now we can see you and can't hear you. Nope. You got it.
Okay. I think we have it now. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. This is for the Accessibility Advisory Committee report. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. My schedule has been kind of crazy. We had a very good last couple of months. We have really 3 or 4 things to report. We got an excellent report from Jordan Holt, who went over the metrics with respect to bus, rail, and metro access. Very pleased to see that over the last year, we've been making steady progress in all 3 areas. It's always good to know that the efforts that are being made are being successful. She also gave a report with respect to safety, stressing cops, cameras, and compassion. We had an excellent report at the AAC last month, or earlier this month, with respect to safety issues. Once again, that was very comprehensive. They really dealt on bus and rail, particularly with accessibility issues, which are something that the disability community is very keenly aware of and have agreed to keep us in the loop on that. So, and particularly the reports that we're getting on metro access, timeliness, on-time performance, and that has been helpful to the committee. We have taken those reports. We look at where we are with respect to the metrics going forward, and are making recommendations based on that. So those reports that she gives us really help us in our subcommittee meetings, particularly on the bus and rail and metro access. Secondly, we looked at we also received a report in July on the fare vending machines. We understand they're at the end of their life. They need to be upgraded as far as technology and just modernization, what they can accept as far as fare venue. We gave some suggestions regarding that, and we understand how old they are. So there are lots of recommendations, particularly with respect to kiosks and those types of transaction machines that we certainly have shared with them and really fall under some of the Section 508 requirements with respect to voice output, ability for cognitively impaired people to be able to use them effectively, and also for the visual aspect of the screens and that sort of thing. So they have those recommendations. They were very good at listening to what the committee had to say, and we found that very effective. Lastly, as far as the Metro Access is concerned, the on-call AI system was demonstrated to us this month, which I found fascinating. The AI system is going to help reduce the call volume when times get busy during the day, particularly around 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was demoed. We have a small group of individuals, about 8, that are going to test it, see how it works with different configurations. Very easy to understand. It can work within 32 languages, which is pretty amazing. Very easy to follow, and we'll go through certain complex scenarios with respect to putting a ride forward, looking at different destinations and that sort of thing. But I think that's great. One of the questions that we had asked was whether the this AI technology would be taking jobs away from people, which we were told it doesn't. It will not. It'll just improve efficiency and effectiveness. So I think that's going to be good. We're thinking that it might increase efficiency by 50%. So we'll look at that and see where that goes. We think that we were told there's a roadmap for using AI within WMATA, and there'll be other areas that we can use that AI going forward. So we're pleased to be able to participate in looking at it upfront. Thank you for that. And lastly, we looked at some signage for buses a few days ago, came up with some recommendations regarding that. Contrast seemed to be very effective. There was a little bit of discussion with respect to how the signs looked when there was light glaring on them, and those issues were discussed. Recommendations were made by my committee, members of my committee with low vision particularly, and they were going to take those recommendations and go forward. So a very good couple of months. We enjoyed our month off, I think, in August, but we've been working on a couple other projects that we'll discuss later on in the year. But I think that our report is steady as she goes between the metrics and all the other things that we're seeing. I think we've got a good accessibility plan going forward, and we look for any other suggestions that you have for us as far as a work plan where we can be helpful. But thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions for Mr. Sheehan or comments? All right, Patrick, thank you so much, and you have 2 minutes to spare.
Thank you very much. I'll yield those back. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to the agenda now. We'll move to the employee spotlight. Today's employee spotlight recognizes several employees for their heroism, service, and dedication. And we'll ask that you please stand when I recognize you or your team, and we'll do photos after everyone is recognized. First, bus operator Marin Harley. Mr. Harley, good morning.
There, fine.
You're good. You're good. On Sunday, August 13th, upon arriving at Silver Spring Station, operator Harley was notified by passengers that another passenger had slumped to the floor of the bus. The passenger was experiencing a life-threatening emergency and became unresponsive. Operator Harley immediately sprang into action, contacting emergency responders, who then guided Operator Harley on performing life-saving CPR. Because of Operator Harley's quick response, he saved the passenger's life. Please join me today in thanking Operator Harley for his life-saving. Like to say a few words? Yeah, we'll call you back up. Yeah. Next, we have another bus operator, Robert Curtis. Mr. Curtis. Operator Curtis was relieving Metro bus number 7114 at 17th and I Streets Northwest when he witnessed an altercation between a fellow bus operator and an unknown individual. Operator Curtis attempted to intervene and aid his colleague when the opposing party stabbed Operator Curtis in his right bicep with an unknown object. He was then transported to the George Washington Hospital with a non-life-threatening injury and released the same evening. Please join us in thanking Operator Curtis for his caring and selfless act in coming to the aid of a fellow WMATA employee. Next, Dr. Neela Babu. Dr. Babu. Today, we congratulate Dr. Neela Babu for her recent recognition in Mass Transit Magazine's 2023 Top 40 Under 40. Neela. Neela joined Metro in 2021 to manage the Potomac Yard Station cutover and startup efforts. In her role, she led the planning of the track cutover and was also responsible for leading all required testing and commissioning activities in support of the station opening. Outside Metro, Neela serves as the immediate past president of the Women's Transportation Seminar, DC chapter, after being president from 2020 through 2021, and vice president from 2018 to 2019. She also leads the chapter's Women Executive Roundtable. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Neela Babu for being named one of Mass Transit Magazine's 2023 Top 40 Under 40 Transit Employee. Next, we'd like to recognize the Summer of 2023 Diversion Work Teams. Today's Employee Spotlight also recognizes several teams who worked around the clock to complete several essential repairs and rehabilitation efforts during 3 shutdowns for the summer of 2023. Collectively, their efforts helped make roof repairs, replace some of the oldest rails in the system to improve reliability, improve platform edge lighting, upgrade switch machines to ensure reliable service, remove vegetation to reduce potential obstructions near the track, and install cables to improve radio and signal capabilities. Their advanced planning also ensured travel alternatives were available during the shutdown. Thanks to their round-the-clock effort, all shutdowns were completed on time and ahead of schedule. Will the following employees please stand? First, the Product Delivery Fiber Project Team: Antonio Ross, Gene Georges, Jerry Kirk, Deron Thurston. Next, the Track Structures Team: Walter Brown, Joseph Slattery, Lorenzo Dupree, Calvin Sims, Sohail Mahood, and Haley Hurrah. Next, the Communication and Signaling Team: Chung Win, Serkan Tunbrul, Nate Williams. Oh, I'm sorry. Is Nate part of that? No, just Chung Win and Serhan Tobrul. And Nate is in a class all his own here, the Work Planning and Maintenance Improvement Team. Nate Williams. Oh. Sorry, he's not alone. Sorry, I'm confused here with the bullets. Sorry. The Major Outage Team: Clifton Reed, Teresa Thomas, Antoine Forrest. Yep. All right. So the board sincerely extends its thanks and deep appreciation to you and your tireless efforts during the summer's rehabilitation work. And now we're going to ask everyone to come forward, and please join us for the photos at the front of the room. Yeah, we'll do this. Yeah, we'll do this one at a time. Yeah, we'll do the bus operators first. Okay, now we'll move on. For public comment reports by the advisory board. We already heard from Mr. Sheehan in the ACC. Now we'll call on Mr. Leibowitz for public comments first. I'm sorry. Yeah. Do we have one online? I think, right? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Heidi Pence. I live in Bethesda in Montgomery County, Maryland. I reviewed the 6 alternatives for future metro work. I'm not sure why WMATA is not utilizing the proposed American Legion bridge work and including a design for future rail line connecting the Silver Line in Tyson with the Red Line in Rockville or Bethesda. If you want to increase the ridership on the Silver Line, I think it's recommended that you connect Maryland to Dulles. The American Legion Bridge is such a major hassle to commute, plus the fact that the Red and Silver Line have to go into DC and then back out to these more affordable places is not ideal. It makes the commute for less advantaged workers way longer and more expensive. This should have been included in the alternatives. Maryland through Georgetown and back out to Virginia is not ideal either. Create an alternative further out connecting Maryland suburbs to Virginia suburbs, especially since Tysons and Bethesda are rapidly expanding. Thank you very much for your time. Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Pence. And we have one in person, Mr. Bill Orleans. Mr. Orleans?
Good morning.
Morning.
Since I first learned that these meetings were again being held in person and that the public could come into the new building, I've been coming at least once in this time in public comment, and certainly almost every meeting, asking staff to get me 5 minutes with the general manager where I could explore the opportunity for me to be able to return to the meetings of the Jurisdiction Coordinating Committee. I repeat, I believe the most important committee meeting in Jackson Graven in this building is not the board meeting, it's the JCC. After several years of whining, I finally was permitted to attend those meetings, and I did so for, I think, 3 or 4 years until Richard Sarles, coming in as general manager, determined that I should no longer be able to do so. Notwithstanding the fact that the JCC is a function of the board and not the general manager's office, the general manager is apparently allowed to make these determinations. So I'm asking again publicly, Mr. Clark, if I could get a few minutes with you at some point to discuss my ability to return to meetings of the JCC. Additionally, I have a comment based on the discussion today and preceding months. Maybe this time the sky really is falling. $750 million is a scary figure. The thought has occurred to me in the past, isn't it time for there to be a public conversation about amending the compact to give WMATA taxing authority? Rather than, I mean, I've often suggested WMATA's board, after adopting a budget, having been put together by staff and conferring with the public, should just present an invoice to the 3 states and the feds and saying, pay up. But absent that, that conversation should, it's not a new, it's occurred in the past, but never in depth. So today I'm actually asking the board to direct the general manager, to direct staff to come up with scenarios, what if WMATA had taxing authority, using varying rates of assessing commercial properties, benefiting from WMATA's proximity to their locations. What would be the revenues having collected retrospectively and maybe prospectively as well? I would ask the board to direct the general manager, direct staff to come up with these scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orleans. Now I'll call on Mr. Leibowitz for the RAC report. And I believe, Michael, are you joining us online? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you, Michael. Good morning, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate virtually today. I'm a bit under the weather, so I apologize in advance for any coughing fits or scratchy voice. But RAC had a productive meeting earlier this month as we worked to assist the board in making our metro system work better for riders both on a daily basis and in the big picture. Our monthly report had a few recommendations for the board based on our rider outreach and RAC interactions with staff. So first with the buses, the RAC had a good discussion with staff about bus improvements, including the courtesy bus initiative that the RAC supports. Courtesy stops, as you know, are limited to 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. with the intent to put customer safety first when it's dark outside. The RAC thinks it's a little bit odd to limit the courtesy stop hours starting at 9 p.m. because it obviously gets dark earlier than that for parts of the year. So the RAC recommends that WMATA consider making courtesy stop hours variable to coincide with actual periods of darkness. So possibly sunset to sunrise where riders may feel unsafe. Drivers have discretion, as you know, on stopping so that can mitigate any concerns about impeding traffic or other hazards. Regarding fare evasion, I know it was discussed in the safety committee or the finance committee a bit earlier today, but riders have reported to the RAC that it does appear, again, at least anecdotally, that fare evasion is going down and is being enforced by the transit police. And we think I definitely think that's in line with the numbers that are being put out recently, which is, of course, is all good news and something that riders do notice and they do appreciate. However, the buses continue to be another story. We've discussed this in the past, and I know the board is well aware and staff is well aware that it's harder to reduce fare evasion on the buses. But one thing I'll point out to you, again, sometimes like the RAC kind of serve as a canary in the coal mine for certain things that might become issues that are still under the radar, but riders have reported to the RAC that they've encountered bus fare machines that are not working. For example, riders on the F4 route try to tap their cards. They reported this to the RAC. They try to tap their cards, but it didn't take their money. And the fact that we've received reports from different people on different bus routes or bus lines shows that this is a problem, and riders have noted that it does send the wrong message to the riders. So, we ask that staff determine where fare machines are working on a daily basis, see if they're working or not. And if they're not, maybe empower maintenance staff the ability to quickly go out and fix the boxes as appropriate. Moving on to just a couple more topics that we had from our report to you is one item that seems a little bit different than what the RAC normally brings to the board at these during our time is IT security and rider data protection. So as you know, again, OIG reporting in February identified several IT deficiencies. Then OIG reporting in June indicated that there are other cybersecurity vulnerability issues from as far back as I believe it's 2019 that have not yet been resolved. So this is concerning to riders. It's one of those issues that isn't an issue until it becomes one. And whether that's a mass customer data breach through SmartTrip data or something bigger that actually affects transit operations. So, and I will tell you that this is something that particularly federal workers and military personnel that take the rail lines, they have raised this to the RAC, and we've had these discussions. So the RAC did invite Metro's Senior Director of Cybersecurity to speak at its October meeting, which we hope will alleviate some of these rider concerns. But in the short term, the RAC does ask that Metro confirm whether rider data has been compromised. And we did want to touch on as well the budget issue. I know obviously is a big concern, was a big topic this morning. And as you know, from the RAC perspective, the RAC continues to explore and plan for rider engagement opportunities with other transit-related organizations. We discussed this at the July board meeting. Riders keep hearing all sorts of numbers and metrics surrounding the potential budget and legislative issues. We heard it again today, and the RAC believes that it's important for regional leaders to hear from actual riders about how there are real people and real life ramifications behind the numbers. This morning, the general manager stated that the numbers are the numbers, and his quote was, "They're not emotional." And he's correct. But from a rider perspective, it is emotional. It drives people's decisions on where to work, who to work for, how can I get to where I need to go. Just the idea not even the actual part of it, just the idea of diminished service is stressful for riders. We keep hearing how leaders at all levels want workers back at the office most of the time, yet we also keep hearing how the potential budget may cause, quite frankly, untenable transit options for riders and the region as a whole due to collateral effects. So the RAC is working with other organizations to develop plans for elevating rider voices as the budget and legislative seasons barrel forward. So more to follow on that as we continue to work on that. Because the RAC can make budget recommendations, and we likely will, but the RAC believes its most effective level of participation on this topic is bring to the table what WMATA can't, and that's the emotional part, the real part, the actual rider stories. But saying all that, we do want to acknowledge all the hard work that staff is putting forward to create so many plans for so many scenarios. I know Dr. Lowe had mentioned that earlier, and she's exactly right. I mean, the RAC recognizes that you don't have an easy job, and we do appreciate everything that you're doing. And finally, just one quick note is that the RAC members have unanimously voted that the RAC member Lucas Haboski will serve as the chair of the RAC's annual report committee. The RAC submitted its first ever annual report to this board this past April, and I believe that Lucas's leadership will guide us to an even better, more useful report for all of you to help you in all that you do in 2024. And subject to your questions, that's the RAC report.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to have the general manager address the one thing about the customer information and the suggestion that it may have been compromised. So we should address that right up front.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Randy Clark here. So, to my awareness, through staff, there's zero compromise to customer data or any protected data, and everything to do with our kind of fare system, financial system, is all this PCI compliance component that is audited third party and validated. So we believe we're secure there, and we'll make sure that we have the appropriate people at the October meeting to talk through. Obviously, some cyber stuff can't be done in a public space, but certainly want to make sure that everyone understands any vulnerabilities that we have and what we're doing in regards to that. But again, I think the customer data, we are pretty confident that there's no leakage or vulnerability to that. And then, since I have the mic, I just want to reiterate, when I say emotional, I was trying to suggest that to the public at large, the numbers are what they are in the sense of their. If it says 200 million, it is just 200 million, and that there's, whether it's right or wrong, it's 200 million. Trust me, there is a very emotional attachment to me personally as a general manager who uses the system every day, but also the one that leads a 12,000 person team that takes a lot of pride in delivering service. So I definitely appreciate your point. We are very emotional about this as well. We're just trying to make it where the numbers don't get debated what a number actually is. The number is what the number is, and that's what we meant by that. So thank you.
Thank you. Totally appreciate your comments, and much appreciated.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Leibowitz? Oh, Tracy, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to affirm that I think it's a great idea for the voices of riders to be represented in the conversations about WMATA's future. And thank you to the Riders Advisory Committee for thinking about that and getting organized. This is exactly the kind of voice I have been waiting for to hear from the Riders Advisory Committee for years. Great work. Keep it up.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Okay. Next, we'll move on to the report by the chair. First, I want to commend staff for their forthrightness and transparency around the fiscal year 25 budget. And I think we saw that on display, earlier today and throughout, the past few weeks as they've been out there meeting with the various groups. We began in earnest with a high-level conversation this past spring and worked progress through the summer and to more accurately define the deficit and to create specific budget scenarios for consideration. But this conversation is about more than money. It's about livability, prosperity, and opportunity. And those are the things that are at stake. We know Metro plays a pivotal role in the economic vitality of the National Capital Region, supporting revitalization, connecting customers to jobs, healthcare, education, and more. As the region grows, Metro will be critical to local businesses, residents, and visitors, as indicated by recent ridership growth and increased customer satisfaction. As highlighted today, the outlook is dire, and there's no other way to describe it for Metro and the region. As such, the region will need to come together for solutions. Everything is on the table, and no stone will be left unturned. As I have noted, this is just the beginning of the process. We need all our stakeholders. That means customers, employees, jurisdictional partners, elected officials at all levels, and so forth. Please join us at the table for this important work. While we refine options over the next few months, we will also be coming to you along the way for feedback and input. We can only keep Metro moving forward with your help and all your help. I'd like to be clear, however, that while we will be working diligently between now and the spring to find solutions for the fiscal year 25 budget, we must all keep working to deliver excellent service, recognize and develop our employees, foster regional partnership, and advanced environmental sustainability. In that vein, before I wrap up, I'd like to highlight that September 15th through October 15th is National Hispanic Heritage Month. In that time of the year, we celebrate the countless contributions of the influence of the more than 60 million Hispanic Americans to our history, culture, society, and closer to home, celebrate their contributions here at Metro. The dates of Hispanic Heritage Month were chosen to coincide with the independence celebrations of many Latin American nations, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, that declared their independence from Spain on September 15, 1821. Hispanic Americans are the largest minority group in the United States today, and generations of Hispanic Americans have consistently helped make our country strong and prosperous. Hispanic Americans embody the best of our American values, including commitment to faith, family, and country, building awareness of what Hispanic Heritage Month is, educating employees on the opportunities and successes that come from cultural diversity, and advocating for an inclusive culture that will strengthen our Metro team. Mr. General Manager, that concludes my report, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair. Appreciate your report. I know we have a fairly long meeting. I want to highlight a couple quick things for the board and for the public. So, first off, I really want to emphasize the great work that the chief, the command staff, and our MTPD department is doing, especially on the community side. So as we saw in the performance report, crime is going down, lots of hard work there, but we are also in the community every single day, and there's probably no type of policing more community centric than transit policing. It is just connected to people. So two things I want to highlight. One, last month and I was over and lucky to participate in this at Fort Todd, and we had a back to school event. It was the first one in the agency's history, gave out over 1,000 backpacks and school supplies to kids in the area, and we had so many officers and members of our community team out there. I want to thank them for the work, and just so many family members that came by. We want to do more of this. This is what we need to be doing. We are an amazing part of this community, and we want to flex into that. The second piece I want to highlight on the right is you've heard a lot. We've talked over the last maybe 6-8 months about really our approach to compassions, cops, and cameras, right? This kind of 3-pillar approach to public safety, and our crisis intervention specialists. So we're hiring another group. By the end of the year, we'll have up, I believe the goal is here to have 10 by the end of the year. But these are individuals that are trained in de-escalation, connecting people to that may have drug or alcohol issues or mental illness issues to services, and connect them to families. And I appreciate Channel 4 actually did a segment on our crisis intervention team just the other day, and it highlighted the help that our team came together, got someone that has had pretty significant issues from New York that was living on the street here and had some issues, and our team actually chipped in, got them back to New York, and connected them with family and services. So kind of connecting someone back to their lifeline. And that's not what people think about a transit system sometimes, but is how to make our transit system work better. And I'm just really proud of the team. And it's really important to highlight this during Suicide Prevention Month. We want to remind everyone, 988, We have signage all over our stations. It's a very serious topic. Lots of people are going through lots of things. So if you see anything out on the system, 988, or if you need help, please 988, and try to get people the help that they need. The next slide I want to highlight is ridership. Tom mentioned this a little bit, and Jordan on the last quarter and how we ended the year. But I want to talk about last week specifically. So last week was our new highest ridership week since the pandemic. Total combined, as Tom mentioned, we're getting close to 850,000, in that range. Rail last week was very high, and keeps growing. And the bus side, we hit 400,000. It'd be about a week and a half ago. Obviously, the weather the last week has not been the best, and that actually knocks ridership down a slight bit. One of the trends that we're seeing, and we talked about, and this will impact this decision of people saying what to cut. Ridership on weekends continues to actually perform very well, and it's higher now on bus and rail than it was pre-pandemic. And then adjusted for seasonality, obviously August goes down a little bit with just the action around. I was also told yesterday was our highest 8 a.m. Peak hour we've had since the pandemic. And so that is a good sign. That means we're building our base commuter customer base back, while we also are accelerating things like weekend, evening, special events. So A and B together is how we get back to our big numbers. The other part here is we're hitting station kind of, if you will, records at a lot of stations that see those, if you will, more office worker trends or commute trend, peak hour trends. So like Farragut North yesterday was its highest since the pandemic. So it's good to see there's different themes and adjustments happening throughout the network. The next slide we want to present here. Board Member Letourneau asked about this, and thanks for giving me a moment to get to the GM report. This is really important, and there's been some local media coverage on this already again this week. We do hope we get to a point where this will not be the ongoing story here at Metro, but I think it's clear we've made an enormous amount of progress in the last year. We have 10 stations completed to date. At those 10 stations, fare evasion is down between 70 and actually in the low 90%. So what's important, and it's really hard to see, so if you see some videos online, the visuals are very hard because on the bottom right-hand picture, it's actually plexiglass instead of railing. And we installed that purposely because one, it's more cost efficient, and B, it's actually safer the way we put the design together. But every one of these stations, all of our exit doors and railings and fencing is all built to the height level of the barriers and the fare gates themselves. So we basically have an effective wall across the entire area. Sometimes you'll get some Twitter or other videos that are lacking context on that. I also want to clarify, we are never getting to zero fare evasion. And so, if people want to continue to do videos or tweets once in a while, that it happens. It's going to happen forever. It just happens in every other system. But we are getting these numbers down. You take some of these locations, like, say, a Bethesda, we're down to about 1% fare evasion. And we can measure that incredibly effectively with all the technology in the gates. A place like Congress Heights, we were over 50% fare evasion before the new gates went in, and we have that station, I think, down to about the 5% range. So we also are seeing a significant increase in transactions at our fare vending machines, especially at places that had a lot of fare evasion. Simply, you can't get in if you don't pay a fare. We also are doing significant amount of police surges at places that don't have the gates done, and including on the bus side, places like, if you will, a Silver Spring, a Minnesota, places where you have a lot of bus bays all lined up so the officers can really try to hit a lot of buses and routes at the same time. It's not effective to have a police officer go to a bus stop and try to stop fare evasion, obviously. We are also, on the bus side, upgrading all of our fare boxes. I think Tom sent me a note earlier today. We're over 20%, I think it is, installed. So it's about 350 of the new ones have already been installed. So we're kind of hitting on multiple efforts to really reduce fare evasion. I believe next week or the week after we start the next round of stations, we are going to focus heavily this fall on our three largest transfer stations, L'Enfant, Metro Center, and Gallery, because so many, one part of a trip goes through those three. But we also have a variety of other stations. But the goal here is to still complete them all by next summer. And if we could pull that schedule in and for less money, we are going to clearly do that. The next slide, I want to highlight kind of a positive thing that Metro had the chance to participate and host last week. As I wrap up here, it's the 2023 Latinos in Transit conference. A few of our team members, Alberto Marino, Jose Reyes, had a lot to do with this, but we were able to host Latinos in Transit here for their early get together, and they had about 300 people visit the DC area to talk about transit and diversity in transit, and a lot of things that are going on in our great industry, toward Potomac Yard Station and our new 60-foot electric buses. So we appreciate the opportunity to be part of the conference, and we had a lot of individuals contributing, and it's great career development and engagement across the industry as well. So just want to highlight, we're doing a lot as an agency internally, but we're also doing a lot industry to help lead, and especially around the idea of inclusion and making a stronger industry and a stronger agency. So that, Chair, is the end of my report, and as I always do, I just want to really thank the team. I appreciate how much the board members are acknowledging the team of Utundi and Tom and all the support for the financial stuff, but it should not go without saying, daily service right now is running, I think, really well. We're going to have some issues from time to time, but a lot of way our metrics are showing service is running as well as it has in years. So everything from Brian, Teresa, Andy, and their whole teams that deliver that, the procurement team, HR, everyone else, the team is working really well right now, and I just appreciate how much they're doing in challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions for Mr. Clark? Dr.
Just a few. Okay, so in understanding the rate of fare evasion as compared to like the absolute number of fare evaders in Metro Rail, you said that we have data that we're getting a big increase in transactions at the if people like buying Smart Trip cards and adding money to them. So are we seeing that? Do we have a sense of like how much non-tap ridership is converting to tap ridership as compared to not boarding the system at all?
I would say we have directional correlation and certainly not 100% causation, if for lack of better statistical terms. So we're also, the system's not monolithic. So we might have one station that might be in an area of our community that has maybe is a more affluent area of our community. We're finding there, I think, more people that already had Smart Trip cards and money on it that are now just actually using their cards, or they're using mobile wallet, right? In other places that people may had to buy kind of day to day or every few days, they might be a little tighter on money. They are now using those machines to a higher level.
I see.
Right? And so the other thing is there's clearly places where someone might move to the bus because that might be more cost effective, but there's other areas where the bus is not an option. No one's going to go from Vienna to Largo on the bus to avoid the fare, obviously, but there might be another trip combination. So nothing is perfect on the data set, but we are basically seeing the rate of fare evasion go more or less in line with the numbers of fare evasion. So both data sets are basically around the exact same thing.
Okay. And understanding that some people don't pay the fare because they don't have the money. What are we seeing in terms of enrollment in the Metro Lift program?
Yeah, so I think we're ready for an update on that pretty soon, but I think we've crossed 4,000, I think, and our goal here is to get towards 5,000, and now we're actually going 2 places to enroll people. So the team has already enrolled. I think by this fall we'll have about 5,000 people.
Incredible.
Yeah, the team's worked really hard. There's a lot of pride in this agency of putting together a regional low-income fare program. There's a lot of people that wanted that for a long time. So that's helping people that really need it, and we're telling everyone else, you have to pay your fare.
I'm not even going to try to parse that, but I think I smoke your motion. Okay, so on the topic of replacing old fare boxes on the bus, right? Understanding that particularly on the bus, not all non-tap rides are a refusal to pay. A lot of it is just a mechanical failure to collect the fare.
Yeah, I don't have an answer in front of me that it's this percent versus that. We are drilling into the data set on that. But yeah, not every single there's people that are trying to pay legitimately that our fare boxes are not working to the level they should. No question.
I experience this.
And then there's people that don't even attempt to pay.
Yeah.
And those are not the same thing, obviously. We want to try to eliminate the latter and fix the former.
Yeah, so we're already moving forward with where we currently have a plan to replace the fare box on every bus.
Oh, yes, over 20% are done, and the team is moving very aggressively on that.
Okay, so that feels responsive to the issue that was flagged in the RAC report as well. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to the report by the Safety and Operations Committee. I'll turn the floor over to the chair of that committee, Mr. Drummer, for that committee's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The following item was referred to the board during the September 14th Safety and Operations Committee meeting. Staff requested approval of the annual update for Metro's Agency Safety Plan, ASP. And once approved by the board, the ASP will be submitted to the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission for approval. The following key changes were made in this year's annual revision to the ASP. It incorporates additional safety efforts under federal code in establishing a risk reduction program to reduce bus operator accidents and transit worker assaults. It also includes progress with our safety management system implementation, including the completion of our 2022 to 2023 milestones, establishment of safety committees and safety risk management processes, and the launch of the incident management framework. It also incorporates feedback and input from Metro employees, the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee, the Executive Safety Committee, the Federal Transit Administration, the WMSC, and Metro Senior Executive Team. Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. We have a motion on the table by Mr. Drummer. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the Board Corporate Secretary to administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair McAndrew?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Aye.
Ms. Klein? Aye. Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Ms. Worth?
Aye.
Mr. Drummer?
Aye.
Dr. Helford?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, we have one administrative item. We have the rescission of the early opening, late close policy. I'll turn the floor over to the general manager, and then we'll discuss after a very brief presentation.
Yeah. Sarah, you ready? Yeah, okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to present a revision to the early open, late close policy, delegating authority to the general manager to provide extra rail service during and outside operating hours, regular operating hours. Also eliminating the requirement for third-party requests and fees. This policy was first adopted in 1997 and further expanded in 2003. We did a thorough peer analysis review, and we are the only system in the country that charges third-party fees. It leads to unpredictability, both for our customers who cannot rely on Metro to get home from events, and also on the employee side. It leads to contentious conversations that we have to have with community partners and nonprofits who can't afford these fees, like the Marine Corps Marathon and small business owners hoping to stay open for New Year's Eve events. Altering this policy allows us to level the playing fields while also generating ever so important marketing and audience development opportunities. Instead of dollars of dollar value, we now have an opportunity to generate even more value for Metro by entering into meaningful holistic partnerships around marketing and advertising, driving ridership, which ultimately is our #1 goal. The GM and I and our teams want to position us as community partners with Metro's interests at the forefront. And over the past month, we've been able to have productive conversations with local venues around this initiative, and they would like to significantly expand partnerships in exchange for support of late night service or early opening when and if needed. We want to be clear that altering this policy doesn't let venues off the hook. We still need to enter into agreements to run extra service, and we're committed to ensure that Metro's interests are thoroughly protected and that ridership will continue to grow. I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts.
Any questions or comments from Ms. Meyer? Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that's been done in a relatively brief period of time, and I know we have some events coming up in the fall that we're looking at specifically. But in your opinion, this is a better way to approach the issue of extra service needed because it gives us more flexibility and
Correct.
predictability.
Yes. And it avoids very last minute agreements that are not properly communicated to our customers.
And I was about to say, I think this is a smart thing to do from a customer standpoint. In my opinion, customers, residents who live in this region should not have to question whether their main transit provider is going to provide them service to a major venue. That said, we have discussed, at least internally, some guardrails around this policy, and is the plan to kind of continue that discussion and bring that back to the board at some point? Okay, so it won't be just any request. We're going to look at some specific criteria.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of board action on extra service for large-scale special events.
Okay, motion by Mr. Letourneau, is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the Board Corporate Secretary administer the vote?
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair McAndrew?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Aye.
Ms. Klein? Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Ms. Worth? Mr. Drummer?
Aye.
Dr. Helfer?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed.
Thank you. We have two consent items for board approval today. I will note that the record that alternate director Helfer is recusing herself from the consent agenda vote due to a conflict of interest and will now step away from the table. I would like to move approval of the following items. A, indemnification of PFM Asset Management LLC. Staff seeks authorization for the general manager or his designee to indemnify PFM Asset Management LLC as part of a financial services agreement. And B, Crystal City East Entrance Project Construction Agreement. Staff is seeking authorization for the general manager or his designee to negotiate or execute a reimbursable agreement with Arlington County to fully fund WMATA's support of the design, construction, and transfer of a new east entrance to the Crystal City Metro Station. I'd like to move approval. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Any comments? Well, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. Next, we have jurisdictional reports and VTC. And other than the WMATA committee met, but I don't think we really have anything to report on. You, Mr. Letourneau.
I don't think so. Just that there is a working group at MVTC that's been looking at our financial issues. There was an update at the committee meeting on the work that they've been doing, looking at identifying potential solutions with the different Virginia options, and also looking at some of this data. I think we're going to see, generally speaking, a desire to kind of recreate some of Metro's data in general from some of these jurisdictional partners, and so obviously we want to be cooperative with that.
Yep. WSTC, Mr. McAndrew.
No updates at this time.
Okay. District of Columbia, Dr. Lowe.
Nothing.
Federal Government, Ms. Klein.
I just want to take a moment to say that the Department of Transportation is preparing for potential appropriations lapse, is the term of ours. As we've talked about before, it's possible that the federal government will experience a shutdown following midnight on September 30th. There are plans on the Department of Transportation's website, which people can take a look at if you're interested in seeing how the agency will be affected. And actually other agencies also have those plans available on their websites as well. For Federal Transit Administration, which is obviously of significant interest to Metro, those employees will continue to work. They do not get their expenses paid from general appropriations. They will continue to work. So reimbursements and things like that will continue to happen, even if the rest of the government experiences shutdown. There will likely, though, be challenges in getting new grants approved for transit agencies around the country, as oftentimes new grants will require concurrence or review from other agencies who might be experiencing a shutdown, whose staff may not be working. But the information is available on the Department of Transportation's website. Folks can take a look and see how different parts of that agency will potentially be affected.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klein. All right, with no further business to come before the board, we will stand adjourned. I'll move to executive session in accordance with the bylaws. I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government. C, contractual or other matters involving confidential or proprietary concerns or the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interest of WMATA. D, audit matters and investigations to include, for example, audits of IT security matters, investigations to be referred for further criminal investigation or prosecution. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today.